Tafadhal. Anybody have any questions here? Tafadhal. Tafadhal, Sheikh.
Sheikh, if there is more than two groups that need to perform the Salat behind an Imam in that situation.
Clear. Type question says if there are more than two groups, they have to perform Salat al-Khawf behind the Imam in that situation. Different ways of answering the question in brief. The first way is, we didn't get into all of the other details yet, the subtleties of it. But to answer the question now, you can minimize the groups and maximize the size of the two groups. Instead of having 10 groups, just have two groups of more people. And the second way, obviously, to make another Imam who has his own two groups until how many times it needs to be done. And Allah knows best. Yakum.
Initials LF from St. Louis, Missouri. Assalamu alaikum mufti. Does the hadith about one not entering Jannah until a debt is settled apply to one who dies while paying off a loan, or has the intention to pay it off?
The hadith about the soul of the believer being held at bay or being held up, mahbusatun or mahbusun, being held up, bidayniha, all right, the nafs of the believer being held until the debt is paid. Does that mean that they won't enter paradise even if they were trying to pay off the debt, etc.? No, doesn't mean that. There is a proper understanding of this hadith, and there's a difference between someone who left the means of the debt being paid off and someone who didn't. Someone whose intention it was to pay it off and someone whose intention it wasn't to pay off the debt. And Allah knows best.
Assalamu alaikum. Ahmed Ismail, question from Equiliate, Nunavut, Canada. Can one follow the way of the Salaf, Prophet and his companions, and yet not call himself a Salafi?
Question says, can one follow the way of the Salaf, the Prophet and his companions, and not call himself a Salafi? Calling yourself something is only one aspect from a larger concept. The most important thing is following. Names and titles are not important. They're not substantial unless it's a name that's been directly mandated by Allah, such as Muslim, Mu'min. That's directly sent down in the Quran. Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah, As-Salafiyun, this, that, Ahlul Ansar Sunnah, these names are not that important at the expense of the lack of content. You understand this? So therefore, bid'ah title, what's important is that you know and you practice. Call yourself Salafi or not, you say I'm a Muslim, trying to follow Quran and Sunnah. We understand the Quran and Sunnah as the companions understood it. Alhamdulillah, that's more than enough. And Allah knows best.
Initials MN from Cleveland, Ohio. During Ramadan, is it permissible to take off work for that month, or shorten the school day, or change sleeping patterns? Allah bless you.
Question comes from Cleveland, Ohio. During the month of Ramadan, is it permissible to take off work, have short days in school, change one's sleeping patterns? There's nothing wrong with that. And if you have the ability to do so, perhaps that's best. But everyone can't do that. Some people don't have bosses that are Muslims, or they are Muslims, but they still need things done. The dunya doesn't stop in Ramadan. But if you do have a job in which you can take off, alhamdulillah. Some restaurants are like that. Some restaurants, not all, some restaurants, they don't even open in Ramadan. And obviously to do that, you have to have a strong clientele. And what your customers, Muslim and non-Muslims, know, Ramadan, we're shut down. And they respect that. It's possible. Where there's a will, there's a way. You understand this? You can do it. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a hustler, you have your own business, work extra hard, 3-4 months before Ramadan, save up enough money in which you can take the whole month off and focus on worship and feeding people and giving charity, staying in the masjid more, etc. And if not, then fear Allah the best way you know how, and Allah knows best.
Initials JA from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Does changing a baby's diaper break your wudu? such as cleaning them or getting najis on your hand?
Question comes from Philly, PA. Does changing a baby's diaper break your wudu? Such as touching them or getting najasa upon your hands? Not necessarily, no. Inshallah, no. The ruling of the wudu being broken by touching one's own private part is a very long discussion among the ulama of Islam. Does the wudu, or is the wudu broken by touching your own private part? And that's what the hadith says. They differ with regards to that. Touching it lustfully, someone touching yours, you touching someone else's, etc. Changing the baby's diaper is something which is going to be reoccurring. Bidnillahi ta'ala la haraj. No sin. Inshallah does not break the wudu. Bi'idhnillah. And Allah knows best.
Initials LF from St. Louis, Missouri. Are families reunited in the qabr if righteous?
The question is from where?
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri. Are families reunited in the qabr if they are righteous? I don't know. I've never heard of this in the Quran or in the authentic Sunnah or anything from the ulama, the scholars of Islam. What we do know is that the slave is in his or her grave, and they will be questioned and they'll be put to a test and a fitna, and consequently rewarded or punished as individuals. Allah tells us about paradise and how those who believe and their children follow them in Iman, Allah will allow them to join their level without diminishing the believers who are on a higher level of anything. All right? The Prophet ﷺ informs us about the standing, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Mahshar, where the people will be resurrected. يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ. You will run from your brother and your mother and so on and so forth. All right? Things like this. People being united in the grave, I've never heard anything like this. And Allah surely knows best. This will be our last question tonight, inshallah.
Question from Nuruddin from Birmingham, UK. May Allah bless you. A completely transgender man accepted Islam after making the transition to a woman, and he seemed sincere. Where should he be placed for prayers?
Type question from the UK, from Brother Nuruddin. And Allah bless you as well and give you the success to all good. Someone who is a completely transgender, they accept Islam, and he's totally, I don't want to, this is a very long debate when it comes to politically correct terms. How is a person to be addressed? Al-Muhim, they're not what they used to be. A she, female, her, whatever pronoun you want to use. All right? Full blown. Do they go on the sister side or do they go on the brother side? It's a very difficult question. Obviously, taking them on the brother side is going to cause clear chaos. Clear chaos. Taking them on the sister side may be less chaos. But to some, it's going to cause a lot of chaos as well. And that's because people are going to notice, people are going to realize, people are going to become extremely uncomfortable. But when a person becomes transgender and they change their gender 100%, physically, with surgery, with the pills, with the attitude, with the dress, with etc., 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 to one aspect, they're not what they used to be anymore. The person just doesn't look like a woman, but they actually start thinking and behaving like a what? Like a woman. So from that aspect, one may say it should be on the sister side, because it's basically a woman now. They're not lusting and looking at women anymore. They're not looking at the women uncovered with their niqab slipped up anymore. This is a reality, all right? And this is a very sensitive topic, of course, and it's a very important topic. And that's because what do we do when someone wants to be a Muslim and they've changed their gender? Or someone who hasn't changed their gender but they're homosexual. What do we do? Do we allow them to be Muslims? Or you can't be a Muslim, you're doomed to the hellfire. Can we say that? Allah forgives shirk. Everyone understand this? One may say, another approach is these people should not be allowed to come to the masjid at all. Let them pray in their homes. They can pray in their houses, they can make salah in their houses, they can have a rukhsah of not making jama'ah. Khalas, there's no need to come to the masjid, especially at this early infantile, pre-pubescent stage of transgender versus Islamic Sharia. It's very early, all right? Back in the day when people were born with more than one private part, the term that's used, hermaphrodite, the things that they were called, it was different. It was known in fiqh. There were always people that were homosexuals. And there were always feminine men and masculine women. And there were always people that were deformed by birth. There always were. But their rulings were different. And I would humbly say, from me traveling to different third world countries, they were always outcasts. And they were never shunned to an extent. Everyone understand this? And this is one of the reasons why in the Middle East or the Far East, other places, which people would have slaves, and they would have men slaves, and they would make them eunuchs. They would castrate them. And one of the reasons why you castrate a male slave is because it's severe trauma and damage to a person's mind. You'll never have a child. You'll never be with a woman. You're half of a man. How much of the man's ego is contained in his sexual prowess? Make fun of you. You can't please a woman. You can't do this. A man who has erectile dysfunction, he doesn't get help because it's so what? Embarrassing. So now you have no private part at all. It's been cut off. So a man who has no type of masculinity, he's going to be more submissive. He's going to be more humble. He's going to be more loyal. And most importantly, you don't have to worry about him sleeping with your wife. You don't have to worry about him impregnating other slaves or concubines because he doesn't what? Have anything. Not can't. He doesn't have anything. Everyone understand this? So the point is that this person who was a slave and was castrated is always going to have that type of mindset. They're never going to get a proper status in society. One, you used to be a slave, and two, you're castrated. So how far up, when a person is manumitted, is he going to go in the ladder of what? Society. And this is one of the reasons why they castrated slaves. Everyone understand the point I'm trying to get to? So the fiqh back then, someone who was masculine or feminine or this or that, it would totally outcast, let alone capital punishment for someone who makes sodomy. So in 2019, transgender is relatively new. Relatively, I said. People have been doing it for some time, but it's relatively new. The new craze in which people are doing it more and more and more and more and more often. When I was younger, if there was someone that was gay or a woman who was a dyke or a butch or whatever, it was still relatively, still was in a closet. It was very taboo. It was nothing like how it is in 2019. Nothing how it is. And I'm sure brothers that are older than me can say what? Even more taboo in their times. So the Muslims dealing with it is even going to be more what? New. It's like, whoa, this is not that simple anymore. You understand this? So it needs stages of development. And perhaps for their own safety, and perhaps for the peace of mind of the practicing Muslims that don't have a mixed or changed gender, it may be best for them not to directly mix and integrate with the communities of the Muslims. Everyone understand this? And obviously you're going to say, well, they have needs. They need to be taught. They need zakat and sadaqah, or they can give zakat and sadaqah. That can be done. That can be arranged. But for them to come to the musalla, and there's a woman on the sister side and her hands like this big, and she has high cheekbones and shoulders like this under her overgarment, I don't think that the people are anywhere ready for that. Would you agree? I don't think they're ready for that. You still have plenty of masjids you can go to right here in this city or other parts of the world in which they're not ready for someone with a different race. You go into a masjid and you have a different skin color. How do they look at you and behave with you? You go to a specific masjid and you pray differently. How do they look at you? Who are you? You're weird. You're new here. Why don't you have a big beard? Is this not the case? It's a reality. So if the people can't get over someone being a different color, a different race, a different Islamic orientation, what do you think they're going to be prepared when someone walks into the masjid and they can clearly see this person has the hands of a man with a khimar on and an Adam's apple like a man with a khimar on? That's going to be extremely disastrous. That's going to be what? Extremely disastrous. So perhaps until there's more education, until there's more awareness, until the affair is properly studied by the people of knowledge with the proper context, the Western culture, maybe it's best for this person not to mix with the what? With the Muslims. And if they do mix with the Muslims, then perhaps it should be limited. Sister comes to the masjid on the Eid and Friday, that's it. With the niqab and gloves on. Maybe the best thing for them until the people have more better understanding. Everyone understand this or not? And Allah surely knows best. Jazakumullah khairan. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa barak.